Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, a new guest is here to share their photography and help us all connect, inspire, and create. The schedule for upcoming presentations is on my website at lindanickell.com. If you can't join us live every Wednesday, then please subscribe to Linda Nickell's Happiness Hour YouTube channel so that you don't miss a session. Elaine Pruden is here to help me run the Zoom room, and she has been reviewing and editing some new blogs that will be added to the community blog, so keep your eye out open for those. Tonight's guest is Liz Crane. Liz is an iPhone photographer based in Northern California who creates unique digital artwork with the help of a few of her favorite apps. And she returns to the Happiness Hour for the third time with her presentation, Getting Inspired, Everyday Tips for Creativity. Have you ever been stuck in a creative rut or felt that you'd love to be more creative but don't know how to go about it? Tonight, Liz is going to help you get unstuck. If you're on Instagram, please give her a follow at Liz Crane Art. Welcome back to the Happiness Hour, Liz.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for having me again. I'm excited to be here. I think I can't add anything about myself to your intro that you already gave, except I'm not really talking specifically about iPhone tonight. I mean, this is something
okay.
Most of my examples are iPhone, of course, but you can do this with any kind of camera that you want to. So,
and let me ask you this, because either I dreamed this, or I read it in one of your posts. Did you get a big girl camera?
Yes, I did. I finally broke down and got a real camera, mostly because I love like people's lens baby photos. And I'm like, there was an iPhone lens baby, but each iPhone generation that I've gotten, it's worked less well. And it was never like super duper great to begin with. I mean, it was interesting, but not like the real lens babies.
Right.
So yes, so I bought a real big girl camera, and yeah. I still I'm gonna do like 90% of my work on the iPhone, except for flowers. Flowers, I think I'll probably be using the lens baby a lot, but
Good.
Still got to figure out how to use it. So
it'll challenge you, and it'll make you. And
that's actually going to be one of the things I cover tonight about trying new things. So
all right, well, I'm not going to steal any more of your thunder here. So with that, the microphone is yours.
So got my social media stuff here on the front page. I am on Vero. I would say I do more on Instagram. Vero, I feel like most of the people that I'm following and that are following me are more like traditional photographers. So like a photo like I have on this page here is probably not going to get a lot of likes over there. So I have to kind of find my audience on Vero. So for now, I'm posting most of my like digital art is still on Instagram. Vero, I'm trying to do, a little bit of more traditional photography perhaps, but we'll see how that evolves over time. So you can feel free to message me on either of those. Luckily, I was able to grab the same username on both of them, so you can find me the same way. And I also have email, so feel free if you ever have any questions. In particular, like if you're trying to do phone photography and you're getting stuck on something, definitely feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help people. So with that, we will dive in. So what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit just about my mindset towards creativity, of it being a skill. It's not like something that you have or you don't. It's a skill that you can build and work on. I'll talk a little bit about a framework of how I think about creative photography. There's lots of like schools of thought on creativity. You probably see other people that have different thoughts. There's no wrong answer. I mean, that's the great thing about creativity. There's no wrong answer. It's all about finding what works for you. Of course, I'll show some examples along the way. And then at the end, we're going to have a fun thing. We're going to do a creativity challenge. So over the next 6 weeks, anyone who wants to participate can help build their own creativity skills. So more on that later. Here I just have a couple of quotes. I think my favorite one on this page is the one from Henri Matisse. Don't wait for inspiration. It comes while working. This is, you'll see how this factors into my philosophy of creativity, but it's really like, it's not like the light bulb all of a sudden goes off. It's like you have to be working at it. You have to, keep doing things. It's not like this magic thing that just happens sometimes. Now, every now and then you do get a brilliant flash. Not saying that doesn't happen, but you can be a lot more creative if you just work at it. And, creativity, it's inventing, experimenting, growing, taking risks, breaking rules, making mistakes, having fun. So I think the key there is like, don't be afraid. Like, not everything's going to turn out perfect. You're going to try something and you're like, ugh, this is awful. I'll actually show you a couple examples in here of things that I tried and I wasn't happy with the result. So it doesn't always work. And Maya Angelou, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. I think, again, that goes to like this, it's just something you've got to do all the time. So my philosophy is really about creativity as a skill. So I feel like, and I'm sure you guys probably aren't this way, but a lot of people tend to think that, some people are born creative and some people aren't. And that's not really true. I mean, it's sort of like any other thing in the world. There are going to be some people who are naturally a better runner or a better football player or a better whatever, but we can all get better at anything we want to by practicing it and doing it. So, you may never become Picasso or whatever, but everyone can become more creative by working on this skill and building at it. So everyone can develop creativity. Everyone can improve their creativity, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't just happen. Like, you've got to work at it and you've got to practice it in order to improve. And that's part of the reason why I have the challenge that I'm going to put forward at the end, because it helps you build that as a habit, trying to make creativity a habit in your life and continuing to work on it, because the more you work on it, the better that you'll get. So this is a framework that I came up with as I was thinking through this presentation. I was trying to keep things simple and something that would be fairly easy to remember. So we'll talk a little bit about the things that are on the left-hand side of the page here. These are just things that you're going to think about as you're out there. It's like, what are you shooting? How are you shooting it? And then what are you doing with that image afterwards in terms of post-processing? And then I'm going to spend more time talking about what I see as sort of the three elements of creativity that you can work on and that you can put into practice and ultimately combine. And those are seeing, exploring, and imagining. And there are different exercises that I think you can do to work on each of those three. So we'll talk about those all in turn. So what you shoot, in terms of how does this play into creativity? I think, to me, the key thing is don't just limit yourself to one type of subject. If you love flowers, that's great. You can get creative photographing flowers, but I feel like photographing other things from time to time sort of helps you, see things differently. Even if you end up going back to flowers after you've been photographing buildings, it's like you will have picked something up from photographing that architecture that will help you see that flower a little bit differently or photograph it in a different way. And then I think, always making sure that you're thinking about what it was that caught your attention or what you want to feature, and then doing your processing to bring that out. Not going to talk in a lot of detail about these particular images. This was just an example showing you hey, you should be photographing a range of different things. How you shoot. So this, it's kind of obvious, looking at what's your camera, what lens type are you going to pick, what's your shooting technique. So intentional camera movement, are you doing long exposures, light painting? There's all sorts of things that you can play around with. And then just thinking also about the angle, the distance from your subject, things like that, and varying those can give you, different looks and help you feel more creative. For example, if you're looking at something kind of straight on, think about, well, what would happen if I got down on the ground and shot this up? Or if it's something that's lower down, what would happen if you just shot directly down on it instead of straight on? And that sometimes helps you come up with more creative shots rather than just the standard, what you notice when you first walk up to something. So the images I have here is just examples. So on the left is a standard iPhone shot of an orchid at the orchid show, and then on the right, one of my first forays with my new camera and lens baby. Same orchid, but different camera, different lens, so you get a very different look. Then there's what you do with it afterwards. So my post-processing probably tends to be a little more extreme than some people's, just because I am into digital art, not necessarily just straight up photography. but you can process things in a more quote, normal way. You can still vary how things look. So you make choices around like, do I want it color versus black and white? Do I want it moody or bright and airy? Do I want it realistic? Do I want it a little more like fantasy, et cetera, et cetera? I could go on, probably do a whole presentation on that. But this just shows you, this is the same image processed 3 very different ways. And you can see, it was like exactly the same photo to start off with. The one on the left is the one that I actually like made and probably like the best. It's sort of like the spooky, like cover of a mystery novel sort of look. But, same image I then took and, made it like, this is more like the Southern plantation, in the springtime. And then this is more like the fantasy winter kind of look, all the same photo. So you can express your creativity in those ways too. So now I'm going to get to the stuff that I think is really important in helping you build your creativity. I think the what you shoot, how you shoot, what you do with it are things that you need to sort of think about. But when I think about like exercises to build creativity, it's going to really be more focused on these next couple of topics. So seeing, I think this is the most important thing. And honestly, I think the more you practice this, the better you'll get at the other aspects of creativity. So you're really teaching yourself to notice things. So you're looking for light, colors, contrast, textures, reflections, shapes, things that surprise you, that like just catch your attention. You want to look at things from different angles. This is one I would encourage you, like practice this all the time. Like even if you don't have your camera with you, I'll do this while I'm driving. I'll see like a scene and you can think about like, well, how might I photograph this? Obviously I'm on the highway. I'm not going to like get out my phone and, snap a picture. But I think about like, well, how would I capture that? What would I do with it? What does it make me think of? So the easy way to start practicing this is just like if you're out on a daily walk or something like that, just pay attention. Like I'm always looking up, down, around. I do try not to like trip on my own feet or on the cracks in the sidewalk. So, make sure you're doing this safely, but just always be looking for things. And, some of these are easier to spot than others. So like light and contrast are super easy to start off looking for. As you like, if you're walking in the morning, you'll notice a certain type of light, and maybe you'll see like a pretty leaf that kind of catches your eye just because of the way the light's hitting it. The next day or the next hour, you might walk by and the light's not there anymore. So some of these will be fleeting. Some of them will be things that are always there. Like there's this one tree at a local park that has this really interesting texture in its bark. And every day I walk past it, I'm like, I need to like spend some time photographing this tree. And I haven't gotten to it yet, but it's always on my list. So a couple of, these are some things that you can do to help work on, how do you see things better? So one is like, just go to a familiar place and pick a fairly small area. You don't want to be looking around like a 10-acre park, but it's more like, hey, sit down on the park bench, just look around you, like find 10 interesting things that you hadn't noticed before, or maybe you had noticed them before, but hadn't really thought of them necessarily as a photographic subject. But think about, well, what is it that caught your attention about that thing? How do you make that photo so that that's really coming through? So that's one thing that you can try. And that's something, do this every day. I can't count the number of photos I take while I'm out walking my dog. Luckily, he likes to sniff every other blade of grass. So it's like we humor each other. Like I'll stop and take pictures of stuff, and then I let him stop and sniff stuff. Every now and then he likes to sniff things at the same time I want to take a picture, and that works out perfectly. But, I'll always be looking. And I do feel like the best place to practice seeing is when you are in like an environment that you really know, because you tend to, your natural instinct, I think, is to kind of like tune out all those details. It's like, oh, it's the same boring walk I do every day. So it's like, if you're not in this creative mindset of looking for things, you're just going to tune out like all these potential opportunities for creative photography. Another thing you can do is you can force yourself to go on like call like a photographic scavenger hunt. So you could go out one day and say, I'm going to look for interesting textures, or I'm going to look for colors. Or you could say, I'm going to go out and look for things that look like faces. Everywhere you look, there's always like things that kind of look like faces that jump out at you. Maybe one day you go looking for reflections. Maybe you go into the city and you're like, I'm going to sit in front of this cool building and wait until someone in a red coat walks by that I can get, to take a photo of. So there's all sorts of things. Pick something that's interesting to you. But in the absence, like if you're having trouble thinking of something, I think textures, contrast, and colors are always like good things to just keep an eye out for. Another thing you can do is picking a principle like leading lines or framing and go look for examples around your house or in your neighborhood. I took a photography class over the summer a few years back, and it was a kind of a more basic introductory, but each week, like one week was the rule of thirds, the next week was leading lines. And it was all, just refreshers on things that I already knew, but it made me like knowing that I had to go find photos of leading lines. It just forces you to look at things a little bit differently when you are out and about. So I think that can be a good way to, find things as well. Going back to the same place or the same subject, so different times of day, different seasons, different weather, you're going to see different things. I mean, I have a million pictures of my local park in every season, just because I've been doing this, every day when I go out walking. Revisit your old photos. I mean, every now and then I'll go back through my camera roll on my iPad and I'll look for like, oh, there's something interesting, or maybe something that I liked at the time, I just never got around to processing. There's always going to be these things. And I feel like the more you build your creative skills, the more you're going to be able to go back and look at some of those older photos and see something new in them that you hadn't noticed before. So don't forget about your older work either. I think creating a series or a photo project can really help too. For example, I had taken a couple cool pictures of feathers, and now it's like I see feathers everywhere just because I had done these couple of cool images of feathers. And now it's like I'm starting to do a series of feathers. I have another series. There's this like wetland area in the next town over from me, and I go walk the dog there fairly regularly. And every time I go, I like take pictures of this wetland area because I like how the reeds are sort of sticking up out of the water and you're kind of looking straight down at them. So it's this sort of interesting angle. And every time I go there, I take more pictures of these reeds, and I'm going to eventually have a nice series of photos of these. So I think it both helps you start to see things. It's like once you've like paid attention to something once, you start seeing it everywhere. And it also helps, again, it helps force you to kind of get out there and do something and try something. If like, hey, I have this photo series, and like, oh, there's a cool tree that would fit nicely with my tree series. Let me go take some pictures of it. So that's seeing. Just a couple of examples here. So the beauty of your everyday walk around your boring neighborhood. I do not live in a particularly exciting neighborhood. It's this little old, town. It's a factory town that was built back in like 1900. And, it's a nice town, but it's not like super exciting. Actually, the most exciting thing about it is that it's right on the water. And it's like, you'll notice that none of these pictures are the water or the bridge or any of those things that like people would traditionally find interesting. I'll also mention, so the top row and this first one and the second row are more like digital art, but the rest of these are all, pretty much straight photography, just with some different post-processing. So don't think that like, oh, well, I can get these creative things out of my local park because I do all these funky things to my photos afterwards. Like you can, of course, that's one approach you can take, but it's not necessary. You can find, perfectly nice straight photographic opportunities as well. So I'll just talk a little bit about each of these just so you can see kind of what was it that I saw when I took these photos. So this first one in the top left corner, and I don't know, Linda, are you guys able to see my cursor where I'm pointing?
I can, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this one, it was a flower, a butyl flower in my backyard. And when I saw it, I thought it, it reminded me of a dancer. And that's a little bit, we'll talk about imagining later. That also a little bit falls into the imagining territory. But it was like, I just loved the way this flower was kind of dancing in the breeze. So I took a photo of it, and then I did, basically inverted it. So I put another flower on the top, and then I made it dancing in the rain. But it was all just because I saw this thing in my backyard and the light was catching it and the wind was blowing it a little bit. And it just reminded me of something. This photo here, it's like a cherry or a plum tree by our local library. And there was this little, like it had this big trunk, and then there was like this one little teeny branch growing out of the trunk that had a couple of flowers on it. And it's like the rest of the tree was just kind of like a normal, flowering cherry tree, where it's like it's got the pretty pink flowers on the top of it. But I loved this little teeny tiny branch with just a couple of flowers that was just growing straight out of the trunk. So I took a photo of that. This one was some ginkgo leaves in the fall, like the tree was starting to lose its leaves, but it still had some left. This was another flower at the local park, which I added a reflection to make it look not so much like a flower anymore. This one in the middle, this is a fun one. So I was tearing up cardboard to put in my recycling bin. So this is what I mean by like always be looking, always be seeing things. I just saw like there's this interesting like honeycomb pattern in the cardboard, and against the background of the blue recycle bin, it reminded me of the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. So I took the picture of the cardboard with the blue recycling bin in the background and then just processed it a little bit to make it look a little tiny bit more like, land and ocean. But that's where like who's thinking about photography when you're taking your trash out? that's what I mean by like always be looking, always be seeing things. This one here, there's this fantastic rusty truck on the other end of town, which I walk by, every so often. And it's got like chipping paint, it's got rust, it's got like all these fantastic different colors and textures. So I take lots and lots of photos of that. This one, I was walking through the local park with the dog, and some kid had like pulled off a little branch of the acacia flowers and just dropped them on the sidewalk. And I just thought that made an interesting thing, just here's this poor flower just abandoned on the sidewalk. And then these two are plants that were growing by the library. Again, this was actually a pretty orange flowered plant, but I turned it black and white just to make it a little more mysterious. And then these were some clematis like vine seed pods growing on a fence. But these are all, again, my boring suburb, just kind of wandering around with my dog, less than a mile from my house. But you always got to be looking, because if I were just walking the dog and not looking, I wouldn't have seen half these things. All right, next up is exploring. So we've learned how to see, we're always paying attention, we're always looking for things. The next thing, it's really, I think of it as expanding your comfort zone. I hate the saying, get out of your comfort zone, because that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel positive to me. The goal, it's not just getting out of your comfort zone. You want to expand your comfort zone so that you're comfortable with more things in the future. And to me, I find this personally a better way to look at it than the idea of getting out of your comfort zone, because getting out of your comfort zone implies like you're uncomfortable and you want to get back in your comfort zone as soon as possible. But it's like, no, you need to make your comfort zone bigger and bigger here. So this is all about learning and playing. So you're going to build your toolbox. So you're going to learn new techniques. You're going to try out new gear. You're going to, learn new post-processing software. This is a theme that I'll repeat multiple times, but don't worry if you're not good at first. Like first picture I took with that new lens baby, it was awful. Like it's never going to see the light of day. You're never going to be good at something the first time you try it, but you have to keep practicing. And as you learn and play with these things, you're going to learn that there are some things that you really, really like. And there are some things that you're like, that wasn't really for me. I'm not going to go back to it. But as you build your toolbox, then when we get to our next phase, which is imagination, once you start, if you have an idea of something, the bigger that toolbox of yours is, the more likely you are to know like exactly how to go about creating that image that you're sort of seeing in your imagination. So this is, like I said, learning and playing is fun. You need to be a little bit careful on this one. Like the time to explore and experiment is not like, hey, I'm on my once in a lifetime trip to like Patagonia. It's like there you want to make sure that you have gear that you're comfortable with so you can capture those moments. So it's like there's a time and place to use the camera that has the settings that you're super familiar with and the lenses that you know and understand to capture things. This is something I would encourage you to do more like when you're at home and it's like, hey, if I take really crappy pictures around my house with my lens baby, it's fine because I can go take, less crappy pictures with the lens baby tomorrow. So you're not like ruining an opportunity at this once in a lifetime thing, but you're doing, and it also gives you the chance to kind of do things over and over and over again. Because as I said, the first time you try something new, it's probably not going to quite turn out the way you wanted it to. But if I know that like, hey, that tree is right down the street, I can go walk by it tomorrow and try again. If I'm not happy with what I did today, you learn something new, you go try it again. And then after a week, you're taking great photos of whatever it is. So some exercises that you can do for exploring. One that's super easy is just to like tackle some subjects that you don't normally photograph. If you do more nature and landscapes, go do some portraits, take pictures of your kids, your dog, your spouse, whoever. Do still lifes, go into the city and take some pictures of buildings. So that's a super easy thing. You don't need to buy anything new to do that. You just need to like tackle some subjects that you don't normally work with. You could try a new lens. That's what I've been doing with the Lens Baby. So feel free. This page here, this is like your excuse if you need to like go buy some new gear, a new program or something like that. This is your permission to go, explore some of that. But also, I mean, you probably have a lens that you don't use that much. And maybe it's because you weren't happy with how it turned out the first time, but it's like, learn how to use it, learn how to get good images out of it, see what it does that, your other lenses that you're more used to don't. If you're primarily a camera photographer, like leave your camera at home for the day and just photograph with your phone, because that's going to give you a different perspective on things. Or if you're me, I'm always out with my phone, so I should take my real camera out for a day and photograph with it. Try a new camera technique. So intentional camera movement is a good one to play with, or doing long exposures with water. Again, it's just the idea of like, find something that you don't normally do and go learn how to do it. Playing around with a new post-processing program or a photo editing app. So I know, like for me, like Photoshop is always on my list. I'm like, I know how to do a few little things in Photoshop, but I am super not good at it. But whenever I feel like I want to, improve my creativity, I'm like, well, let me go learn how to do something new in Photoshop. Or maybe I downloaded a new app and want to see, what I can do with it. You can also revisit an app or a program or a technique that you haven't used in a while. This is something, I have so many apps on my iPad, and it's like, I'll use one and it'll do some cool things, and I'll use it for a couple of weeks and I'll make like dozens of images. And then I'll sort of forget about it for a while because I've moved on to the next shiny thing. But I think sometimes going back to some of those, that's like, hey, and this is again goes to like flipping through your photo catalog again, because you'll be able to see that like, oh, I remember, what app was that I was using for that? I should go do some more with that. So revisiting, I think, can also, I mean, to me, it's kind of the same thing as learning something new. It's just revisiting these things that you haven't done in a while. Taking a class, doing a workshop, watching tutorials on YouTube are always great ways to get inspired too. I mean, I do the Out of Chicago Live every year, and I try to take at least 1 or 2 photography classes each year. And, honestly, even if it's like your local camera shops, like Camera 101, like you're going to go and you're going to learn something new from it. That's just the way these things work. There's always some little new tidbit you can pick up. And I would say, like, as you're doing some of these things, like photographing subjects you don't normally do, or trying a new lens, trying a new program, go watch a tutorial on YouTube first, learn how to do it right, and then go play around with it. You don't have to go into these things blind, just like messing around. You can go, learn a little bit. So like when I got my Lens Baby, I went back and I rewatched some of the videos from Out of Chicago Live from like Ann Belmont and the people who are good with the Lens Babies. And I'm like, okay, now I kind of get the principles a little bit. And so I feel like my attempts with it were more successful because I went back and I watched those videos and I learned a little bit about it first. So here are some examples of things that I've done, when I was in this exploring mode. So the picture of the orchids. So this is based on that Lens Baby image that I took. So it was both a new camera and a new lens. And I know I said, like, be careful taking, new stuff like that out when you're, trying to really capture good pictures. This was the orchid show. The camera and the Lens Baby showed up like 2 days before the orchid show. So I took my iPhone too. So I have lots of iPhone photos of orchids in case the Lens Baby ones didn't work out, but it was just an opportunity I couldn't miss to play with the Lens Baby. So I did, and actually really loved this image. Now I did stuff to it afterwards. That's not straight out of the Lens Baby, but the base photo I was pretty happy with. This middle one here, it was a new editing technique. So I'd been seeing some posts in a Facebook group that I belonged to. It was called the Pep Ventosa technique, where you like take multiple exposures of something as you walk around it, and then you can do it in camera sometimes if you have the right camera, or I did it, in post-processing software. But it was something I saw that I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I took pictures of the gazebo and tried that technique on it. This is an example of revisiting an old technique. So the iPhones have this portrait mode, which, they've had since, I don't know, at least like the iPhone X or so. I can't remember when they introduced it, but I think I had tried it out on whatever the first iPhone model was that had it. And, it was kind of fun for a while, but then it's like it did some funky things. I wasn't super happy with it. And so I just sort of forgotten about it and hadn't really touched it in years. But I got my iPhone 14 recently, and I'm like, I'm going to give this portrait mode a shot again, see what happens. And good news is it's improved since whatever last camera model was that I was using it on. And so, I've been playing with that lately, trying to come up with some cool images. This one on the lower left, I have this app called Slow Shutter Cam on my iPhone, and it does both multiple exposures in camera as well as letting you do like long exposures. So I was playing around with intentional camera movement where I did like one exposure moving horizontally and one moving vertically, and did them together in camera. So that was a new technique I was practicing. The ginkgo leaves, it was a new app that I had downloaded, and I wanted to, just play around with it and see what it could do. All right, so now we're going to go to the last one, which is imagining. I think this can sometimes feel like the hardest one. I know it is for me. So for example, I can paint, not as well as I can take photos, but I can paint somewhat. But to me, the idea of like a blank canvas and having to come up with something to paint, like that's why I don't paint, honestly, is because I could never think of what to paint. So I think this can feel like the hardest part. But if you work on the seeing and exploring, it makes this part easier. So the goal here is that you're going to generate ideas that you can bring to life. So, having a concept or idea, and then you go and figure out how to execute it. So you think about that, what to shoot, how to process it. Or, maybe you see something and you have a vision of what you want it to become. And that goes better with an example. So I'll explain that in a little bit. But it's sort of like when you see something, like I see a tree, but what I'm seeing really isn't the tree. It's something that the tree reminds me of. And so how do you make that come out in your photo? So this is another one, you're not going to necessarily get it right the first time. So think about what you would do differently, what part didn't work, try again. But this is where, seeing is important, because if you're not looking around and always seeing things, you're going to miss opportunities for this sort of idea. And also having a large toolbox is important, because if you do have an idea, the worst thing in the world is to like have an idea of this image you want to create and then not having any idea how to go create it. That can be super frustrating. So the more you build that toolbox of both, your techniques, your post-processing software, et cetera, the more likely you are, like if you do see something or if you do have an idea, you're going to know how to go off and execute that. So some exercises to help you with imagining. What else could it be, or what does it remind you of? So this is one where, we'll go through some examples in a minute. But, when you look at something, that tree looks like a bear, so it's just seeing, what are those other things that you're seeing besides just the obvious literal, it's a tree trunk. Getting inspired by a favorite artist can be an interesting way to, sort of trigger your imagination as well. So it's like there's this one botanical garden that I go to regularly, and every time I walk past their lily pond, I always think of Monet. And so, anytime I'm there, sometimes the light's not right, but it's like I'm always trying to like photograph that pond like in a Monet-esque manner. So you can think about, either how might this particular artist approach the scene you're photographing, or how can you create a photo that's reminiscent of Monet, Picasso, et cetera. Reading, watching movies, listening to music. I know those sound like they have nothing to do with photography, but you'll see in some of my examples in a minute that like those can help trigger your imagination as well. Following other artists on Instagram, et cetera, whatever your platform of choice is. Don't just follow photographers, find some painters who do interesting work, find some people who do very different types of photography than you do. You're gonna get ideas. So I'm going to jump down to this keeping an inspiration board or journal or scrapbook or something, but it's like, I'll walk around. It's like, I can't count the number of times I've seen like a painting in a gallery, and I'm like, oh, I could think about how to make a cool photo that would look like that. And so I'll just snap a picture of it. And then I have like an inspiration folder on my iPad where I just keep all of these things that I've like screenshotted or, taken quick snapshots of. And someday I will figure out, I'll find the right subject and the right technique, and I'll turn those into images. I think also trying out other art forms. So sometimes painting, writing, playing music, if you do any of those can help those all help build your creativity too. It's not necessarily just limited to photography. So now to go through some examples of imagining and how these things came about. So in the top left here, when I'd taken this picture at a winery that I belonged to, and when I looked at it afterwards, it just made me think of a Seurat painting. Was it Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte? It just made me think of that. And so I processed it in a way that kind of gave it more of that impressionist look. This one here, this is the rusty truck that I had showed a couple slides ago. but what else is it? It looks like a bird to me. Maybe it looks like something else to you. But I think it was important, like I saw that bird, and so that influenced how I captured the photo. The cardboard in my trash bin, when I saw that, it made me think of the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. It's got like these hexagonal basalt columns that are like, right, in this area right next to the ocean. And that was seriously what jumped into my mind when I saw this piece of cardboard. And so that's why it's so important to like go places, look at art, listen to music, read books, etc. Because then when you're out there looking, you're going to start seeing these things that remind you of something else or somewhere you've been. The flower, we already talked about a little bit. This was another example of what else is it. So I saw it dancing in the wind, and so it might seem a little obvious, but then I'm like, oh, how about a flower dancer? And now I have like a series of photos of flower dancers because it's windy where I live and there's flowers. So, I find a lot of these. This one happens to be my favorite one. I think it's the most creative, but it sort of inspired this whole series that I'm working on of dancing flowers. This photo here, when I walked up to this tree, to me, it looked like Old Man Willow from the Lord of the Rings books. I don't think Old Man Willow made it to the movies, if I recall, but he was in the books, and that was totally what I thought about. It was just like this old dead oak tree on the edge of a flooded creek. But as I was walking up to it, and you'll see the original photo in a couple slides, the tree, like, to anybody else, it just probably looks like an old dead oak tree by a creek. But to me, it looked like Old Man Willow. And so I processed it to kind of bring out that more like moody fantasy kind of look. And then this one on the bottom right here, this was a song. So I belong to an abstract photography Facebook group, and they have like weekly events where there's a certain theme and you have to like take or create photos along that theme. So one week's theme was, to illustrate a song. So I had to think about, what songs. So I like wrote out a list of like songs that I could potentially see making a photo out of. And I landed on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I knew I had these photos from a musical instrument museum in Phoenix that I had been to. They had like this exhibit of these super cool guitars. So I just had a picture of this photo or a picture of this guitar like hanging on the wall. And I'm like, okay, how do I make it look like it's weeping? And this is where like knowing your toolbox really helps, because I knew that there's this one app that I could use to create these sort of streaks that look like the weeping part. I knew there was this other app that I could use to create the reflection in the pool of water at the bottom. If I hadn't known those, it's like I would have had this idea and I would be like, well, I don't have any idea how to do that. How do you make a guitar weep? But because I had those things in my toolbox already and I was familiar with them, I was able to very easily, like, as soon as I thought, I'm like, oh, I have this picture of a guitar while my guitar gently weeps. That's easy, because I'd worked on building those skills. So a couple things to point out. So the guitar one and the Seurat painting in the top left, those were ones that I didn't actually see those in the moment that I shot them. So sometimes you will see these things when you're shooting them. And that's what happened with the other 4 on this page. I saw those things when I was shooting. But with the Seurat painting and the song, like I didn't see those until afterwards. The painting I saw like when I was kind of looking through my photos after the trip to the winery. I'm like, oh, that kind of looks like that. The guitar one, like that didn't come to me until this particular challenge popped up in my photo group. And then I decided, I'm like, oh, what song could I illustrate? But it's like when I was shooting this guitar hanging on the wall, I'm just like, that's just a cool guitar. I'm going to take a picture of it. I was not thinking about this at all. And so that's where like inspiration can come to you at different points in time. Like sometimes you'll have it, when you're actually sitting there shooting it. Like I said, with Old Man Willow here, like as I walked up to this tree, I saw Old Man Willow. The dancing flower, I saw a dancing flower. But even if you don't see it in the moment, you can sometimes find it later too. So as you practice this, you'll find you start to combine seeing, exploring, and imagining. I've already probably talked that a little bit as I've shown some of my examples. And you don't necessarily have to consciously say, oh, I'm going to go combine seeing and exploring today, or I'm going to combine exploring and imagining. It just sort of comes to you naturally as you practice this more. So just to give some examples, so this is Old Man Willow. So this is the photo. It's still a cool tree. I mean, even if you don't see Old Man Willow in the original photo, but to me, like I said, as I walked up to it, I saw Old Man Willow, and that's why I processed it the way I did. But my original photo, like even to me, it doesn't necessarily capture Old Man Willow to me in the photo. It's all about what you do with it afterwards. This is an example of seeing and exploring. So I love spiral staircases. I'd gone to this particular building in San Francisco that had a cool spiral staircase purposely to take pictures of the spiral staircase. Then, later on when I had downloaded a couple of new apps and I was playing around with this app called Photospiralysis, which takes your photo and like spiralizes it in cool ways. And then I also played around with different blending modes to bring in more interesting colors. So this was totally like playing around. Like I had no vision for what this was going to turn out to be. So this is what can happen when you're playing around. You don't necessarily have to have a vision of what it's going to be in the end. You just kind of dabble and play around. And if you find something cool, you're like, oh, wow, that's cool. And then next time I know if I like see something that I really want to make like this, now I know how to do it. But sometimes, I will totally admit, like a lot of my work, I'll just be sitting around there playing with things and like, oh, that's kind of cool. Let me continue to work in that direction. All right. So back to exploring and imagining here. So this was one where I don't know if you remember, I had these in grade school. I don't know if you guys did, but it's like a black board where there's like color underneath and you like scratch off the board and you expose the color underneath. And I don't know what made me think of that. But I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to make a photo, that's kind of that way where you're sort of like scratching off to expose the color underneath. So it's like, that's a really interesting concept, but this is one where I'm like, I didn't know how to do that right away. So I had to go figure it out. So first thing was finding a subject that might work well. So I had this image of a tree. I love to take pictures of trees. I have all kinds of photos of like twisty old California oak trees. So I turned it black and white because the whole thing is like you're taking something black and scratching it off to show the color. Then I'm like, well, how do I get a color layer underneath? And I could have just used, I've taken pictures of just, colored bits of walls and other pieces of art and things like that. I could have used that, but I had recently taken an acrylic pouring class. And so I'm like, well, I wonder if there's a way to like make something that looks like an acrylic pour, on the computer. And so I did a little bit of Googling and I found, a YouTube tutorial on how to simulate an acrylic pour in this app called MetaBrush, which I happen to have. So I watched the tutorial, I saw what he did, and then I went and did that. And I created the faux acrylic pour in the bottom here. So now I have all my pieces together. It's like I've got my tree, I've got my acrylic pour. So then I layered them together. I can't remember if I used Snapseed or iColorama, but some program that lets you layer things and then mask out certain areas. So I put the color layer down first, then I put the tree on top, and then, with my Apple Pencil, I scratched out to, expose the color through parts of it. And it didn't turn out exactly the way those like scratch boards do, but I was happy with the result. But that just sort of shows my thought process of like how you get this idea, but then sometimes you have to go figure out, what are the things that I can do to create that. Here's the page that, I don't know if I really want to show these photos on something that's going to be recorded, but just to show that like you're not always going to be successful. Like sometimes you're going to see something and you're going to try and capture it and it's just not going to quite come out right. Or you're going to try a technique and it's not going to be quite what you hoped. So I wanted to show you guys a little bit of, failure and not just like, oh, all these like wonderful, magical, creative images. Like there's a lot of crap on my iPad that I would not want to show to anybody. So just to kind of walk through what these are. So the picture in the upper left, I was walking my dog and there was this miner's lettuce growing in this like weedy woodsy patch, like on the side of the sidewalk. And the light was just beautiful. Like the sun was backlighting these things and it was just gorgeous. And I'm like, oh, I've got to take a picture of that. And the sun was just super glary, the background's super busy. It's like you kind of see the light coming through the leaves, but it's like what the photo looks like and what my brain saw when I was looking at this were just not the same at all. Now, I could probably post-process it a bit and get it closer to what I was hoping for, but I decided like, no, I'm just going to go back another day and see if I can catch the light a little bit earlier, a little bit later, and maybe, not have so much sun glare. But it just didn't turn out quite the way I saw it as I was walking on my walk. This next one here, this is another one of those pet ventosa, like in the round, like take pictures all around and then layer it over each other. Loved this fountain. I'm like, oh, that might be a cool subject to do, but it's just not working. I think, the backgrounds, like, on one side of the street, you've got the sugar factory, you've got houses on the other sides, you've got some trees behind it on one side, and it's just like too many dissimilar backgrounds, I think. And so it was just not not working for me. So I'm like, maybe I'll try it again. But I don't know. It might just be a subject that because of the way the backgrounds are, it may never work for this technique. And that's okay. I'll find something else that does. This one on the bottom left, it's actually not a bad photo. I think I may continue to play with it, but I had watched John Cosmopoulos did a presentation at Outer Chicago Live where he was doing, I think he called it infra inversions, where he would take like an infrared photo and then he would like invert it somehow in Photoshop and like blend the two back together a little bit. And it came out with these sort of like ethereal looking city views. So I decided to try it with this photo I had taken of the Palace of Fine Arts. And it's interesting. It doesn't quite achieve the look that I was going for. So I would say maybe I'll get success there eventually, but this one wasn't quite working for me. And then this last one in the corner here, I actually don't hate this image. I think I probably even posted it on Instagram when I made it. But the goal here, I was trying to make a Father's Day card for my dad, who's really into both golf and wine. So I had an image of wine glasses and I had an image of the Lone Cypress, which is near Pebble Beach. And so I was trying to like blend those together and create this pretty Father's Day card for him. And it turned more into like this gothic, I don't know what. So it's kind of a cool image, but it was definitely not like the look that I was going for at all. And I worked on this thing for hours trying to like get it to look like how I'd kind of imagined it, and I just could not get it there. So that's the creative process. You learn just as much from the thing. Actually, you probably learn more from the things that don't work than from the ones that do. And you've got to do these things that don't work in order to learn and grow. So how do you make creativity a habit? Because this is the important part. Like, I mean, you could watch, there's umpteen presentations out there about creativity and books and whatever, but if you don't actually practice this and do this, you're not going to find yourself feeling more creative. So some of these are things that I've already touched on some of the other slides, but creating photo series and projects are a great way, I think, to help build your creativity, because then you're always looking for new things to add. Doing a 365 project is something that some people do. Again, you're forcing yourself to get out there and do stuff. And I think the idea of a 365 project is like, you're not going somewhere new and exciting 365 days out of the year. You're probably walking around your neighborhood in your backyard for, 300 of those days. So I think it sort of forces you to be looking for those things as you're out and about. Entering contests could be something that might work for some people, or just sharing your work. Have a goal of like, hey, I'm going to post on Instagram once a week with something new. Things like that can all help you keep motivated to keep doing things. Joining or creating a group and doing photo challenges, or if you have other local photographers doing, meetups. I think the idea of having other people to help you stay inspired, I think, is really important, because looking at other people's work is going to give you ideas. I think having these challenges, it helps keep you accountable. It's like, if you know that like, oh, I want to enter this photo challenge, or, oh, I'm going out on Saturday with some people from the area to, take pictures around town. That helps, it just helps keep you motivated. The inspiration board, I think that works really well for me. Again, some of these may work for you, some of them may not. I'm just throwing them all out there. But, I tend to like be out there and I'll like see something and it gives me an idea, but maybe I don't have time to like act on it right away, or maybe I don't know how to do it right away, or maybe, whatever the reason is, you just can't get to it right away, but you don't want to lose any of those thoughts that you have. You don't want to lose them. So like, write them down, take a snapshot, take a screenshot, keep those, and then go back to them every now and then. So it's like, I go through my inspiration folder every now and then. I'm like, oh, now I have a great photo to try that technique on, that sort of thing. Revisiting your old photos. This is a great activity, especially for rainy days or snowy days. If you can't get out to take new photos, looking back through your old ones and thinking about, do I see something that maybe I didn't see when I initially took this, or is there something else that I could do with it? And then, just repeat, don't get discouraged by failure. When you do have something that doesn't work, try to think about like, well, why doesn't it work? What's not working? How might I do something differently next time? And then ideally go out and do that thing and then see if that improves it, and keep that cycle going. All right, so now I'm just about to the end here. So I want to throw out a challenge. So for the next 6 weeks, and on the next slide, I've got the actual activities that we're going to do each week. But if you want to participate, there will be a new challenge each week for the next 6 weeks. I looked this HH Creativity Challenge for Happy Hour Creativity Challenge. I didn't see anything using that hashtag right now on Instagram. So I'm like, well, let's just use that. So, tag your photos with that HH Creativity Challenge. And that way, we can all look for them and see them. I will try to remember each Sunday to post with a reminder about what the next week's challenge is. But, when I flip to the next page, please, take a screenshot or a photo or something of that, just in case I forget or I'm running behind or something like that. And again, this is not mandatory. You don't have to do all 6 weeks. You can post 10 times one week and not at all the next. It's whatever works for you. But I would encourage you to at least, try and do some of these, because you do need to, like I said, practice. And it takes a while to create a habit. And I think that's the thing. You really do need to make creativity a habit in your life. And then you'll find yourself being more and more creative. So here are our challenges. So you've got a couple days to kind of think about this. I'm not going to start the first week until this coming Sunday, the 12th. And we're going to alternate between activities that are related to seeing, exploring, and imagining, so that you can kind of practice all of those. So the week of 3/12, go to your yard, a local park, spend 30 minutes looking for things that you hadn't noticed before. And I guarantee you're going to find some fun stuff. Next week, the week of 3/19, it's going to be about exploring. So this is where, pick something that you don't normally photograph. I gave here architecture, portraits, and still life, so you don't have to think too hard about what to do. I'm assuming probably everyone here has at least one of those that they don't do regularly. So pick one that you don't normally do. Bonus points if you find a tutorial or a YouTube video or something to watch, at the beginning of the week, and then go out and put that into practice. But the idea is just, expanding that comfort zone by taking photos of something that you don't normally do. All right, week of 3/26, we're going to be imagining. So pick a favorite artist and create an image inspired by them. This doesn't necessarily mean slap a Van Gogh filter, from some program onto a photo. It doesn't even have to necessarily look like that artist's paintings. It could just be you look at a particular painting and you love the color combination. So you go, make a photo that has that same color combination. Or it could be like my Seurat painting example, where it at least is somewhat in that style. It's really up to you, but think about what is it that's inspiring to you about that artist. And, like I said, it's up to you how you bring that inspiration to life. Next up, April 2nd, we're going to be seeing again. So it'll be a photographic scavenger hunt. So I've given you 2 options for what you can go scavenger hunting for. One would be interesting textures, and the other would be things that look like something else. So like the tree stump that looks like a bear, or the bit of rust that looks like a bird, whatever floats your boat. Week of 4/9, we're back to exploring. So try a new photo editing program or app and see what you can create. So And it doesn't even have to be a new program. It could be I always try and learn something new in Photoshop. A lot of these programs have so many features. Or it could even just be as simple as trying hey, I never played around with luminosity masks in post-processing. Let me play around with that. It's totally up to you what you want to play with, but the idea is find some new editing technique and see what you can do with it. And then the week of 4/16, we're back to imagining. So pick a favorite book, movie, song, and create an image inspired by it. So one way to think about it is hey, if you were in charge of creating the movie poster or the book or album cover, what would that look like? And, go take a picture. I do have asterisks on a couple of these. Some of them, obviously, like the one where you're going out to your park and looking for things to take pictures of, I want you taking new pictures. But some of these other ones, like the picking a favorite artist, or this one where you're picking a favorite book or movie, or where you're trying out a new program, if you want to go and revisit some old photos for those, that is totally fine. Those are fair game as well. So that's it. That's my challenge. If you're having trouble thinking of new programs to try, this is a recycled slide from an earlier presentation of just some iPad apps that I like. Most of the Snapseed is free. The others, I can't remember. Some of them are free, but you have to pay for extra features. Like Prisma, I'm pretty sure has a free version. You just get more if you pay for it. So don't go spending a fortune, obviously. But if you want to pick something else to kind of dabble with, these are some things you could play with. There's obviously the learn how to do something new in Lightroom or Photoshop or Topaz if you use that, or whatever photo editing program you normally use for your post-processing. But if you need ideas, feel free to, pick one of these too. And then lastly, just where to find me again. So social media. I do have a website. I keep telling Linda, I'm like, someday I will do something with the website. For right now, I just own the domain, so nobody else can take it. But someday I will do something with it. And then you can always email me as well. I'm back. Were there any questions that I need to tackle?
There are a few. I'm going to ask you to take your screen down so we can see ya. Okay, these are Lynn's baby questions. Okay, I'll just get you to answer it. Karina wants to know, what is a Lynn's baby?
Oh, so I am definitely not the best person to explain that. It's basically a lens where it has like a limited area where it like focuses really sharply, and then it gives you some kind of blurred effect in the rest of the image. Different lenses give you slight differences in terms of like how big the area of focus is. They're a little bit tricky because they're all like manual aperture, manual focus. So, they have a definite learning curve. It's not something like, oh, just slap it on the camera and go out and you're going to take great images. You definitely, and like I said, that's why I went back and watched videos. It's like, I feel like I like learned all about the lens baby. And then once I actually got it, I'm like, okay, this isn't too bad. I was able to get some images where it was actually focused. Bought a camera that has focus peaking, which definitely helps.
Definitely helps. Yeah, they're I guess they fall into the creativity lens. It's one of those, I'll pull out mine if I just want to do something completely different. Especially I use mine for flowers mostly, so you can only take so many pictures of a flower straight on the macro lens and different things. But a lens baby allows you to just play, and you're never going to get the same photo twice. So but we'll just say it again, they are manual lenses. So I struggle with it, but they are fun. So I would recommend that you go to YouTube and look for Lens Baby, or go to lensbaby.com. They have wonderful videos of their different lenses, and they kind of give you hey, this is what you can do with it.
Or if you wanted to see examples of what, follow Anne Belmont on Instagram if you don't already, because like most of I feel like most of what she posts there is lens baby. She does a lot of lens baby with flowers, and she's totally an expert. And I don't know, I have never met her personally, but she's just such a sweet person from everything I can tell. Like she's always happy for people to reach out to her and things like that too. So.
And I will say that I have met her, and she is all that. She's like a little bag of sugar. But feel free to reach out to Anne Belmont. You can go to her website and let her know what you're looking for. And I'll whisper in your ear. She usually has a discount that she can kind of guide you in the right direction of if you're looking for something in particular, or the type of camera you're using.
Yeah. I bought the Soul 45 because I was able to pick it up used on Adorama for like $100, and B, it's a fixed aperture, so I only had to learn to deal with the focusing aspect. Right. So I will eventually probably get another of the lens babies that has a variable aperture as well and play with that. But I'm like, my first time with a real camera, I'm like, I should keep things simple. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, somebody else was curious which lens baby you had. So I have that Soul 45, and it's, I kind of overused it. I used it on everything. It was fun to play with it, in landscape. It was definitely a lot of fun with flowers, but it was really more fun for me to do something kind of funky with landscapes. And it's also like a 45 millimeter, it's a very sharp lens. So so that's a Lens Baby Soul, SOL 45. Okay, so I think the answer is yes, but Melissa's curious, do Lynn's babies work with mirrorless cameras? And
Yes, I have a Sony A7C mirrorless, and it works with that. When you're thinking about which type of lens baby to get, I know it can make a difference if you've got like a micro four thirds versus a full frame. So you gotta make sure you do your homework before you buy something. Because I know I've seen Jerry Jones talk about like the Twist 60, which she loves, and that one works better on a full frame than it does on the fourth on the crop sensors. So
let's see here. Let's see. Real quick. Let me just scroll through here. Somebody's just saying Donna's got the lens baby velvet 56 and the 85. I've got the 56. I love that lens. All right. I think okay, there's one question in here. It's from Darlene, and it's a selfish question for Darlene because she is going to be a presenter in a couple of maybe next month, I believe. She wants to know, what program did you use to make your presentation? Is that a
PowerPoint, like the least creative program in the world. It's PowerPoint on Mac. I don't know. I don't know if it's a different version of PowerPoint, but it's like I have PowerPoint on my work PC, and then I have PowerPoint on my personal MacBook. And for some reason, the stuff I do on my MacBook like feels more creative, even though it's theoretically I think the same PowerPoint. But yes, it was just PowerPoint. Nothing fancy.
That's okay. You made it fancy. So, and your photos make it fancy. Liz, this was another out of the park win for you. I love having you because you do stuff that I do not do. Your brain is much more creative, and
your brain is creative too, Linda. You just got to practice.
It's a different type of creativity. And when I look at, the flower, the dancer, I'm like, yes, I've seen those photos. I can do that. I've done that. But when I see some of the other more graphic stuff that you're doing, it's just like, holy crap. They're so unique, and they're fun. And I do wish I could just, like when you find time to sit down and work on your website, I'm going to find time to sit and just play. And that's just something that I think that you emphasized tonight was we need to play. We need to let ourselves not be afraid of the misses. And thank you for sharing those. I know that's painful to, show your not so perfect work. And, bravo to you for doing that. I hit delete so nobody knows things.
I mean, some things are, I'm really bad about deleting because I always feel like, some things, like if it's just completely out of focus, then and there's no hope for it, yes, those just get tossed. But a lot of ones, like I won't necessarily throw them out, at least until I'm running out of storage space on the iPad. Then I'll do a purge. But it's like you never know when you're going to go back, and maybe
exactly
like my picture, the miner's lettuce with the lights, like it totally didn't work in what I was doing it for, but it's like maybe it'll make a nice background for something later that I can blend with something else. Or maybe you learn some new technique and you're like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I know how to fix that. So
here's your challenge. The next time we see you, maybe perhaps that's your challenge, is to do something with that miner's lettuce. What is it called? Miner's lettuce?
Miner's lettuce. Yeah, it's a California native plant. I don't know if it grows in Texas or not, but I've never eaten it. Supposedly it's edible, but it has these like sort of green heart-shaped leaves and little tiny, tiny white flowers. But it's all over the place this time of year. So,
well, that's your challenge, to dish up a little salad and do something with that image. All right, Liz, thank you so much for coming. I so appreciate you doing this.
And I hope everyone will join the creativity challenge. I think it can be a fun way to like get inspired and practice a little bit. Yeah. And then obviously it's like, it's not a hard and fast, like if you want to do something else that week, great, do whatever gets you inspired and makes you happy. But it's just some exercises that you can try, and we can try them together and see what people come up with.
Liz, why don't you, if you don't mind, put that hashtag in the chat. And I hope that a few of the people in this room, don't make me call you out by name because I will, use that hashtag. All right, you can connect with Liz on Instagram at Liz Crane Art. And please don't let her down. She's going to be looking at that hashtag. So please, please, please use it.
Yeah, I don't want to be the only one posting on there. So,
all right, next week, my favorite redheaded spitfire. Her name's Rebecca Moran. will join us for her presentation, Behind the Shoots. Rebecca is a rodeo photographer, and I can guarantee she will entertain you with some of her stories in her presentation, Behind the Shoots. So until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.